My name is Soulaf Abas. I am a painter and a printmaker. I was born and raised in Damascus, Syria, but I currently live in Indiana. And I have faced a number of challenges, physical challenges being one of them, not being able to walk until I was 16 years old. Then the unfortunate uprising, then civil war that hit my country, Syria, and most recently a fire caught at my house and I lost my belongings and my artwork. All of it is part of the story, but not the end of it.
How did it all begin?
So I was born with a physical challenge in my feet where my feet were facing backwards and I could not walk for the majority of my childhood until I was 16 years old. So needless to say, I could not play with kids. I could not do any of that. So painting and drawing became this refuge for me. That was the beginning of my knowing that art is my path. There was no question about it for me. When I was 16, I walked. When my parents took me to see a play downtown in Damascus, I'm from Damascus, Syria, they passed by the Russian Cultural Center and they had a poster of people at easels painting. And I told my mom, I want to be there. That's my place. And again, no question about it. She was like, you got it. And that's when I started painting and drawing, and then college started and I was in the fine art college in Damascus, and then I got a scholarship to come to the US. That was in 2006. I went back to Syria in 2008 because it was part of my J1 visa. You have to spend 2 years in your home country. I taught art at the European University there. I taught design and art history. Then in 2010, I came back to my MFA program at Indiana State University, and a few months later, the uprising started in Syria. And once again, or for the first time, I had been separated from my family by choice, just being abroad and studying. But this time around, I didn't know what was going to happen. So I went on this mission the summer after in 2012, and I went back to the heart of a war zone. And I stayed there with my family because I had lost so many members of my family that first year. And from that stay in that summer of 2012, I was in complete shock. People would ask me how Syria was, and all I can think about is the normal day-to-day stuff. Never did it occur to me to tell anybody about the bombing that we slept every night to, and the indescribable things like the smell of burning bodies and all of that. Somehow I just was like, go down, go down, go down, suppress it. Then I lost a member of my family that was so dear to my heart in September of 2012. And the word homeless never felt so true. The home we carry inside us that makes us feel like we belong, that was blown out. That was just gone and shattered. That's when I started my body of work about Syria. And from that body of work came a project that I did overseas in refugee camps called Scene for Syria, that I did art education and art therapy with refugee children. And I did an art and letter exchange between Syrian and American children. And I created a book called Me and You. And the book for the past 12 years have sold over $50,000, where the children got all the proceeds in the refugee camps. And it has always and always will be 100% for these children. But because of my efforts, the Syrian government decided I was a helping terrorist, because in their eyes, the fact that you left your country means that you're opposing the government. And because I was helping those particular children, then I am opposing the government. So they banned me from entering Syria for the past 12 years. And because of that, I was not able to see my family for the entire amount of that time until I became a US citizen last year, and we met on neutral grounds for 13 days. I think there is something so incredibly grounding about walking into your own space. And I have to say, this is the only time I cry. I do not process things with a lot of emotion, verbally. But I walk in my studio and a sense of safety overcomes me. What happens between me and the brush and the canvas is just hours and hours alone. And Rilke's words, these are unsayable experiences. And I think truly paint and color reaches aspects of emotion that words just don't. Because on a scientific level, these are two different operations of the brain. And so even when I teach art, I tell my students about this, that these moments when you are present, you can't describe them, because by describing them, you have broken the silence of being present. And to me, to say art is healing is again an understatement, because you are literally channeling information and experiences that no one should be experiencing, and you are putting them in a different context so your brain can actually, process them. But in that process, you expand as a person, you expand as a heart and as a soul and as a spirit, and somehow it makes it all worth it. I was in a state of shock for a few days when I saw my house burn. I was in shock again when I saw them haul out all of my artwork and put it in a dumpster. And it was a surreal, just completely surreal experience to me. I've come up with an artist statement. It's like I work backwards. I see what I have to say, and then I create the work that corresponds to it. And all I can think about for weeks now is what hope looks like. And it is not delicate. And it is not fragile. It is kind of dirt on your face, paint under your fingernails, and it is a fighting spirit through and through, which I completely feel like is possessing me right now. Every time something happens where people get stuck in the sadness of things, I go to the studio and I'm like, this is the moment. This is it. And I don't know what it is, but I know that when I am mixing paint, I am present, and different media has different things to say to me. Watercolor to me is such an unforgiving medium that it grounds you to the present, and it says to you, you have to show your discipline. You have to forget everything else. You have to forget your story, and you have to be in the moment. But oil painting is so forgiving. It's like a maternal figure in my life. It's like no matter what happens, you build on this, you create this, and it has so much more complexity and it has more richness to it. And I float between those two media because they allow me expansion in two entirely different directions. And what emerges is more wholesome experience of me as a person. It could be two entirely different bodies of work. They could look like they were made by two different people, but they're not. They are totally and thoroughly me. And the reason why I chose the watercolors for this show with the boundaries theme is because of one moment where I was about 6 miles away from the Syrian border when I was in Jordan. And I was on a humanitarian mission, and all the doctors and nurses went to take pictures under the sign that said Syria 10 kilometers. And it broke my heart. Nobody's fault, right? Like, they were from the US. To them, that was a big moment. To me, it was impossible. Like, how? How is this home? How is my mom an hour away and I can't get to her? And in my head, I was thinking, how does this relate to painting? That is the only question I ever ask myself when something falls apart. If this is a painting, what would I do? Because to me, painting is not something you do in the studio, it's how you live. Art is a way of living, not something you do while, your life is happening on the side. If this was a painting, would I flip it upside down? Would I walk away from it to gain perspective? Would I look at it through a mirror to gain that shift in the view? If it was a medium, what would it be? And I instantly knew if this experience was a medium, it would be watercolor, because watercolor floats and colors begin and end without us being able to put any boundaries inside them. And that's how overwhelming it felt. I felt like I was drowning. And so from that experience, years later, came a body of work called Boundaries, where I would do these large-scale watercolors, and I would go in with a pen and I would outline every boundary, not to stop memories and experiences, but to regulate, to be able to process. And every single one of these paintings have taken me tens or hundreds of hours to accomplish. In fact, one of them is 18 feet long, and it took me 900 hours, exactly 1 year to finish. And it's called Flow. And that was truly the state I was in mentally when I was creating it. It was a state of flow, because you can't pay attention to anything else. You can't be thinking about something else and trying to follow a color. You have to be so precise. And so to do that, you pay attention. And when you pay attention, somehow some of these painful moments reshape themselves. In 2015, my parents' home was targeted, and my mother was there by herself, and she survived. She survived with her one plant. And strangely enough, 9 years later, my house caught fire, and the same exact plant survived in my home, the only thing that survived. But when this happened in 2015, after my mom was taken to the hospital and treated because she had a collapsed lung, the ceiling fell on her. And we didn't know if she was going to make it for so long. But after all said and done, she went through and she picked part of the missile that hit the house. She put them in a bowl and she put them right by the front door. And I thought, oh my God, you're crazy. What are you doing?
Yeah.
And she said, this is the blessing. This is me owning my story. Otherwise, I become a victim. Mm-hmm. These words have never left me. How we tell our stories. Yeah. And I think that is the question that shapes artwork, that shapes experiences, that separates us from living as grieving persons or going through a phase of grief. Because many people fall into grief but never rise out of it. And it is a phase of love, right? It is just the love we cannot have or give anymore. And so to me, I think about it and I was like, but there is a way to give all of this love back.